I was 10 years old the first time I hauled a shovel alongside my dad, digging a trench across our family's patch of earth in Willow Creek, Nebraska. The air was thick with the smell of damp clay and prairie grass, the kind of summer evening where you could hear the crickets tuning up for dusk. Dad used to say the land doesn't just grow crops, it listens, feels the water's pulse through pipes we laid with our own hands, like veins keeping the fields alive. Our 15 acres weren't much to look at: dusty, stubborn dirt that fought you most of the year, but when the spring runoff came down from the bluffs, those trenches we carved turned it into life. Corn, soybeans, a bit of alfalfa for the neighbor's catlight, all depended on that water, flowing steady, predictable, through ditches we'd built over decades. My grandpa started it back in the 50s, post-war grit in his bones, and Dad kept it going, every valve bolted tight, every slope measured to the inch. By the time I was grown, I'd earned a civil engineering degree, spent years with the Army Corps fixing flood zones in places like Guatemala and Iraq, learning how fast things fall apart when water gets ignored. When Dad passed, heart gave out during a barley harvest, I came home, took over the land, and made sure those trenches stayed legal, filed with the county, stamped with easements, flow rights, the works. It wasn't just dirt to me, it was a promise. Then came the developers. You know, the type city folks in slick SUVs, waving blueprints like they owned the horizon. They called it Crestview Estates, a shiny new HOA with gated entries, fake stone fountains, and houses so big they looked like they'd eat the prairie for breakfast. The board was led by Diane Kessler, all sharp smiles and power heels, the kind of person who'd call a tractor an eyesore but never stepped foot in a field. They built right up to my fence line, their glass-walled clubhouse glaring at my barn like it was challenging me to a duel. I got an invite to one of their meetings early on, figured I'd be neighborly. Diane leaned over her podium, peering at me like I was a stray dog, and said, "That open ditch of yours, Mr. Larson, it's a breeding ground for bugs. Can't you pipe it underground? Make it prettier, prettier." I swallowed a laugh, laid out my maps, showed her how that ditch kept half the county's crops from drying out and the lowlands from flooding. She nodded, handed me a bottled water, and I knew she hadn't heard a word. Things got tense fast. HOA notices started showing up on my gate-me fence was non-compliant. My irrigation pump was disruptive during quiet hours. They were testing me, poking at the edges of my patience, but I had the deeds, the permits, the law. I figured they'd back off. Then one morning, I heard the growl of heavy machinery. 2 bulldozers tearing into my backfield from their side, ripping up the trench like it was nothing. I ran out, shouting, waving my arms. The driver, some kid with earbuds, shrugged and said, "HOA orders, man. Talk to them." I pointed to the survey marker, a steel post I'd set myself, and told him, "This is my land, kid. You're trespassing on a legal easement." He just pointed to his work order. I snapped photos, equipment, plates, the torn-up earth, called the sheriff, who called it a civil matter, called the county, who said the HOA had filed permits based on a redrawn map. A map that erased my trench, my rights, my family's work, like we'd never existed. I got hold of their documents, and my blood ran cold. They'd used a survey from the 70s, before Dad even laid the first pipe, showing my land as empty pasture. It was a lie, deliberate and clean, and they were already pouring concrete over my irrigation line. I stood there the next day, watching their backhoes chew through pipe older than their board members, the air sour with diesel and betrayal. A valve Dad had etched with our name, Larson, 1984, lay cracked in the dirt. I picked it up, heavy as memory, while 2 HOA guys in polo shirts told me to step back for safety. I looked one of them dead in the eye and said, "This trench kept your fancy lawns from flooding for years. You just killed it." He smirked, said something about community standards. I walked away before I did something I'd regret. That night, I called an old friend, Tom Granger, a hydrologist I'd worked with on flood projects. He drove out, took one look at the mess, and said, "They didn't just bury a trench, Jake. They built a dam." We spent days mapping the damage drone footage, soil samples, runoff models. The data was brutal. Their new home sat on a choke point, trapping water that used to flow free. Meanwhile, my fields were drying out, neighbors' crops were failing, and the HOA kept watering their imported sod like nothing was wrong. I sent a cease and desist, filed a county motion, even tipped off a local reporter. No dice. Then they came for me personally, a certified letter accusing me of obstructing progress, calling me unstable, demanding I retract my claims. They called my trench decorative. Decorative. That word hit like a slap. Dad didn't break his back for decoration. I didn't map flood zones in war-torn deserts for aesthetics. I was done playing nice. The rain came a week later, not a storm, just a steady, relentless drizzle. For days of it, and Crestview turned into a swamp. Their park was a lake. Their streets were rivers. Their basements were soaking. Homeowners posted videos, kids' toys floating in yards, sewage backing up. Diane sent out alerts. Remain calm. Sandbags at the clubhouse. I watched from my porch as she sped by, phone to her ear, tires spraying mud. The county sent engineers, one of whom stared at my trench map and muttered, "This was active infrastructure." They buried it. I handed him my laminated proof and said, "Tell the state." That's when things broke open. A teacher named Sarah, who'd bought into Crestview's green living pitch, showed up at my door with a jug of cloudy tap water. "This used to be clean," she said. I gave her my files, and her blog post, "The Price of Paradise," went viral. Farmers, ranchers, even HOA residents started talking. We met at the old fire station, projected my maps, shared stories of dead crops and yellow wells. By the time we hit 60 signatures, the county had to listen. The HOA fought back, nasty. A glossy newsletter called me a crank with outdated grievances. They ran a cartoon of me in a tinfoil hat, standing by Larson's Folly Ditch. Online, they pushed ads, fake drone footage blaming my land for the floods. At the grocery store, a guy sidestepped me like I was toxic. But I had an ace, Evelyn Carter, a lawyer I'd worked with years ago. She found a 1999 FEMA clause protecting my trench as critical infrastructure. Then a county clerk tipped me off. An HOA-linked IP had erased my trench from the GIS maps. Fraud, plain and simple. I walked into court with that evidence, my deeds, my drone footage, and a story. Not just about pipes, but about my dad's hands, calloused and steady, about a town that forgot what kept it alive. The jury took 3 hours. They ruled for methyl injunction, trench restoration, fines for the HOA, personal liability for Diane and her board. She went pale, her lawyers scrambling. Outside, I told the cameras, "This isn't about winning. It's about the land breathing again." Restoration started that spring. County crews dug out the old lines, found pipes Dad laid still holding strong. I walked the trenches daily, guiding slopes, checking flows, like I was back in Iraq, only this time it was home. A Crestview mom, Tara, donated to a repair fund, saying, "You were right, we just didn't listen." Kids from the school came by, asking about the treasure pipe. I showed them. I told them it wasn't magic, just memory, the land's, my family's, ours. The barley came back that fall, green and stubborn, like it knew we'd fought for it. Diane. She apologized publicly, voice breaking, then left town. Some say she's writing a book. I don't care. The water flows again, and that's what matters. But here's the thing, standing on the new bridge we built over the trench, watching water glide under moonlight, I wonder, how many other towns are paving over their roots, thinking progress means forgetting? What's it take for people to listen before the floods come? I don't have the answer, but I want to hear yours. Drop a comment. Tell me what you think about HOAs, land, truth, or just what keeps your community alive. Because if we don't talk about it, we're just waiting for the next flood.